Donald Trump's co-defendant Walt Nauta asked for a very simple thing in his case, a continuance. We know that this prosecution against Trump and Nauta involves classified documents. Their teams need to get licenses and get cleared so that they can go see these documents and investigate them. And so they asked for a postponement because Walt's attorney is in trial and the government says no. Sorry, objection. They want a real speedy trial. I think they want to get this thing done before the election so that theoretically they could put Trump in handcuffs. We'll see if that happens. And so any postponements or continuances are just not something that they're going to agree to. But this was what Walt asked for. He said very simply, 6 pages. He said, okay, Your Honor, here is the defendant, Trump's co-defendant, through his lawyer, Stanley Woodward Jr., hereby request the continuance of the pre-trial SEPA conference scheduled for July 14th this week to a date that's mutually agreeable for all. Trump's lawyers don't oppose this request, but the defense has conferred with the government and typical. The government opposed this, typical DOJ, and they declined to provide any dates when they would be available for a continued hearing. Wait a minute, what? So they give us some backstory here. They say Nauta was indicted despite the fact that the investigation leading to his indictment had long been conducted by a grand jury impaneled in DC, which is a fun point to put in here. That's going to come back up despite the fact, okay, like that's them saying, you know, in other words, this sentence is not really necessary for a continuance motion, but they put it in there because they're irritated about it. And I've been irritated about this too. Remember what has been happening in this case, just to zoom out, catch our breath for a quick minute on this point. They are prosecuting Donald Trump in Florida. See right here, Southern District of Florida. But they did most of their investigating in DC because that's where the judges would give them the authority to breach attorney-client privilege and executive privilege. And that's where Woodward and his client were interviewed. I mean, all of this stuff was taking place in DC, but then they used what they got out of there by breaching all of the normal protocols, and they took that evidence and they indicted him in Florida. And they did this sneaky thing in Florida too. Remember when we heard that audio recording that was so damning? It was Trump waving around the documents and it was going to be the nail in the coffin, and guys like Andrew Weissman were doing backflips and cartwheels before waking up the next morning with a hangover when they realized that that audio wasn't recorded in Florida. It was recorded in New Jersey. These things matter. These are jurisdictional issues. And so the reason it's important is because maybe the Florida judge wouldn't have allowed the breach of executive privilege or breach of attorney-client privilege. And then the grand jury wouldn't have returned that evidence. So they're bringing it up here and they're going to bring it back up again. It's just not ready yet, but he's still inserting it right here in this continuance. So he says at all times, and it's just a dishonest thing to do. You know, it's playing in your favorable district and taking those bits and pieces out and then tactically using them in Florida. Why don't you bring the whole case in Florida if it's such a good case, Jack? At all times relevant to this investigation, defendant Nauta has been represented by an attorney licensed to practice law in DC. With little to no notice, right? Nauta got a lawyer in DC because the whole thing was taking place there. With little notice to defendant Nauta, the operative indictment in this matter was returned in this district and only recently. On Wednesday, July 5th, did Nauta get local counsel, which we covered last week. Now on Friday, June 23rd, the government filed a motion requesting the court set a Classified Information Procedures Act pretrial conference, a hearing to get together to talk about the procedures. Although government counsel, the prosecutors, they asked whether Nauta's longtime counsel opposed the hearing. We did, and we provided an electronic courtesy copy of the same. The government did not request any dates when defense counsel would be unavailable for such a conference. So this is a scheduling problem, basically. But the government is being shady about it. We opposed your request, and then they just filed one anyways, and the dates got set. So on June 26th, the court entered an order granting the government's request and just set a date for July 14th. At that time, Nauta and his lawyers were not getting copies of the notices, and the government did not advise the lawyer that the pre-trial SEPA Classified Procedures Conference had been scheduled. And even when Nauta's team did learn of the conference, Nauta had no ability to formally move the court for relief based on his lawyer's unavailability. It was not until Wednesday, Nauta got a lawyer, and then we could actually file with the court, right? Because you can't just file, you've got to have access to electronic court filing, which is what this ECF stands for. Mr. Nauta respectfully requests the court continue this conference, right? That's all he's saying. Just postpone it a little bit. As the government has long been aware, Mr. Nauta's counsel, they've been long aware of this, all right? They know about this. He's scheduled to begin a bench trial on July 10th, today. Hopefully it went well today. Accordingly, Mr. Woodward will be unable to attend on the 14th. Now, they're going to say, the government's going to come back and say, well, we don't need Mr. Woodward. And they say, yeah, we do. He's our client and we need him to be here. The government only only broadly describes the basis for this conference. Why are we even here for the conference? To establish a discovery and a motion schedule, an order of disclosure for dates and deadlines and compliances and how this whole disclosure process works. Because they've got 31 classified documents that Trump's team should have the right to inspect and make the argument that's not actually classified. No, that was declassified. No, that's a personal record. Sorry. But defense counsel cannot meaningfully opine on this. What does this even mean? It's not feasible to expect us to agree with the government when we don't even know what they're asking for. So they say, Judge, can we please just continue this, postpone it a little bit? It's not going to be a problem. Therefore, we ask for a continuance. Signed, Stanley Woodward Jr., representing Trump's co-defendant, Walt Nauta, also signed off on by Sasha Dayton, who is the Florida licensed attorney. Pretty simple motion. Lawyers in trial. What's the government going to say to this? Do you think that they're going to say, oh, no problem, we'll postpone it a week or something like that? No, of course not. They're the government. Here's what they say. They say, Your Honor, we oppose and we object. They say that defendant Walt Nauta submitted a motion to continue to postpone our court trial, our pretrial proceeding. He seeks the continuance because one of his lawyers is going to be in trial, but he doesn't indicate when Mr. Woodward would be available, nor does he explain why his other lawyer is not capable of handling the procedure. An indefinite continuance is unnecessary, will inject additional delay, and is contrary to the public interest. The government, therefore, opposes this motion. They say that the indictment against Donald Trump is in violation of the Espionage Act, and by virtue of those charges, it's going to involve classified information in this case, both as part of discovery and throughout the trial, obviously. And so this meeting is going to govern how this case proceeds. In order to assist in how CIPA will affect these proceedings, we want to schedule a trial. They say Section 2 pretrial conference in the law is a crucial step in this prosecution. It's going to elucidate the procedures that the parties are going to follow for classified discovery. And I'm very curious about this. I do want to know what the actual process is, because the government is in possession of all of these materials. And as a defense attorney, right, you want to see that stuff. But how long do you get it? Do you have to go over there to see it? What's the jury going to see? What can Trump see? What lawyers can see what? Who can help on it? Almost a month has passed, and there's a strong interest in this conference occurring as originally scheduled. They say his excuses are not needed. First concerns are about his commitments elsewhere. It's a bench trial, but he's got another lawyer, and so the other lawyer should be here. And they say, you know, also he was put in contact with the security group some time ago. And so long story short, they say, Judge, don't move this date at all. Delaying this a number of weeks without any justification is contrary to the public. And so leave it as it is, even though he doesn't even have a lawyer, right? Other guys in trial. You know, just figure out whatever you do in your life, whatever it is. And you have situations like this, okay? You have people that you work with. Hey, can I reschedule that thing next week? I've got a conflict. I've got to be over here. Yeah, no problem at all. Just move it a week, move it a couple days. It's the same thing here, except this is not how the government works, right? People have conflicts. This guy's in trial. It's hard to be in two places at one time, but this is how government prosecutors just are in general. You know, I hate to say it, but it's true. Signed off on here by Jay Bratt. I wish they weren't like this. You don't have to be like this, man. Julie Edelstein and David Harbach. There's a better way to live. Just be a normal human, but they're not. So this other lawyer is literally in trial, and they're like, that's fine. Figure it out. All right, you know. So, okay, typical from the government, but they are objecting to this. Now, we are still waiting for Donald Trump and his team to file their response for the trial continuance, because as it stands, we are scheduled for trial in this case in August. And until the court says otherwise, this case is going to go very quickly. And of course, we will continue to cover it as it unfolds. Thank you for subscribing, my friends, as we do.